Controversy erupts this morning over a planned U.S. visit to Greenland this week. It comes as President Trump has pushed to annex the autonomous Danish territory, saying he thinks the U.S. will get it one way or the other. Second Lady Usha Vance and National Security Advisor Mike Waltz are expected to be among the Americans visiting. The White House says Usha Vance will attend the island's national dogsled race and, quote, celebrate Greenlandic culture and unity. But Greenland's prime minister is slamming the visit, calling it, quote, highly aggressive and sinking relations to the U.S. to a new low. Let's get right to the White House. CNN's Elena Treen is there. It's the second international trip by the Second Lady, Elena, and it's an odd one.
It is, and I think it just is really putting a further spotlight on this administration's desires to try and purchase Greenland, despite, of course, we're hearing repeatedly now, several different times over from both the leaders of Greenland, but also Denmark, that Greenland is not for sale. And just to back up here, to give you the big picture, I've talked to several White House and Trump administration officials about the president's desire to purchase Greenland and make it a U.S. territory. This both before he was in office and after he was sworn in. And part of the reasoning behind it is, one, they argue it would be economically beneficial to the United States. That's in part because Greenland has vast stores of rare earth minerals that are would be great for technology here in the United States. But another, and this is the key thing that I think the Greenland's prime minister was really focusing on here in his criticism of these visits, is there are national security interests as well. That's in part because the United States really sees Greenland as a way to try and curb both Russian and Chinese aggression in the Arctic region. Now, I want to read for you some of what Greenland's prime minister said in response to these visits, particularly as it relates to National Security Advisor Michael Waltz's visit this week. Again, focusing on that national security part of the desire by the United States to purchase it. He said, quote, "What is the National Security Advisor doing in Greenland? The only purpose is to demonstrate power over us. His mere presence in Greenland will no doubt fuel American belief in Trump's mission, and the pressure will increase." And all to say, the pressure has been increasing now for several weeks during, and you mentioned this, John, during Donald Trump's not State of the Union, but a joint address to Congress, which was essentially a State of the Union address in February. He said directly that I think we're going to get it one way or another when referring to his desire to take over Greenland. All to say, the tensions between these two countries are incredibly, have been escalating at an incredible way over the last several months. Again, before the president even officially took office, those are only escalating further this week with these visits from the Second Lady and Michael Waltz.
Meanwhile, a new round of negotiations in Saudi Arabia to end the war in Ukraine, and it comes as the special U.S. envoy is making comments that sound an awful lot like ones made by Vladimir Putin.
Yeah, those comments by Special Envoy Steve Witkoff yesterday, who I will say is currently now leading that delegation in Riyadh with different representatives from the Kremlin, are quite concerning, I think, to the Ukrainians. And part of this is because, and we've heard this now repeatedly in our conversations, with our reporting with Ukrainian officials going out of these talks, is there's a big concern that perhaps President Donald Trump is so eager to get a deal and do it so quickly that that he may give away more to the Russians than they are willing to concede to. Now, we heard Witkoff essentially say this weekend that he takes Vladimir Putin, the Russian president, at his word, that he doesn't believe that he wants to take over Europe. Things that are, of course, very concerning to people in Ukraine as they're entering these talks. So this is a huge day for the broader ceasefire talks overall. We know that the goal here is really to hammer out, I'm told, specific language on the pathway to trying to find lasting peace between Russia and Ukraine. John?
Elena Treen at the White House this morning, where there is, as always, a lot going on. Appreciate it.
Leaders in Greenland are fighting back, saying what the White House calls a cultural visit is actually highly aggressive. Second Lady Usha Vance and National Security Advisor Mike Waltz are expected to be among the Americans traveling to Greenland later this week. The White House says that Usha Vance will attend the island's national dog sled race. Greenland's prime minister, though, responding with this, quote, What is the National Security Advisor doing in Greenland? The only purpose is to demonstrate power over us. Joining us right now is Alec Eisenstadt, national political correspondent with Politico and the author of the new book, Revenge, the Inside Story of Trump's Return to Power. It's good to see you, Alex. This also seems to be part of that inside story, is what kind of made me think of it. I mean, so many people saw what the Greenland issue as a trolling exercise. But what's the inside story here now?
Mm-hmm. Well, it feels like it's becoming increasingly serious now, right? The fact that you have the National Security Advisor going, the fact that you have Usha Vance going, which itself is kind of interesting, right? Because now maybe she's going to start to become more of a prominent figure in this administration. But, you know, what's also interesting here is that this is part of this broader annexation effort that you've seen Trump really being fixated on in his second term in office when you talk about the Gulf of America, when you talk about what he's been doing with Canada. And just as what he's now been doing with Canada, you're now seeing some pushback from Greenland officials on this front.
I'm also thinking what the inside story is coming out of after this weekend. There's an interesting moment from Republican Senator John Curtis, breaking from Elon Musk and his accusations that Social Security is a Ponzi scheme. Curtis did say that Republicans aren't being honest with the American people about this. Let me play this.
We're not being honest when we look people in the eye and say we're not going to touch it. If we don't touch it, it touches itself. You know that, right? That's not being honest with the American people. And I think that's one of the things that makes them not trust us.
And he also said that there's the context to it, Alex, is that, he said that the government needs to assure those in retirement or near retirement that their benefits won't be touched, but that younger people, they need to start that conversation that Social Security is insolvent. How is that going to land inside this White House, do you think?
Well, here's the thing is that the White House has made very clear that that entitlements are off the table. And there's a reason for that. From a political perspective, Republicans who've tried to suggest changes to entitlements in years past have faced severe political blowback. You remember George W. Bush faced blowback for this when he tried it in 2005. Paul Ryan in the early 2010s tried to talk about Social Security reform, faced tremendous blowback. So the White House is acutely aware of this. But now when you have someone like John Curtis going out there and talking about this, talking about making changes, Curtis, by the way, has been outspoken, says he wants to be the tip of the spear in terms of being able to talk about potential reforms to entitlements. It potentially creates an opening for Democrats to run on in next year's midterms.
It's also reminded me of something the Commerce Secretary said last week about also Social Security on a podcast. Let me remind people.
Let's say Social Security didn't send out their checks this month. My mother-in-law, who's 94, she wouldn't call and complain. She just wouldn't. She'd think something got messed up, and she'll get it next month. A fraudster always makes the loudest noise, screaming, yelling, and complaining.
You talked about how the White House has been clear. They say they're not going to touch it. They just want to root out waste, fraud, and abuse from Social Security. But what is the inside scoop when it comes to Lutnick and Trump's return to power?
Right. So Lutnick is a guy who he's ruffled some feathers in Trump world because he has a reputation for going a little bit off message sometimes. And you look at what Democrats could do with that clip is they could send it around, easily use it in TV ads. Why? Because Lutnick himself is a billionaire. It might not be the best look for the Republicans politically to have a billionaire going out and talking about cutting entitlements like that. So it's interesting because Lutnick is a guy who became prominent in Trump world towards the end of the campaign. He showed up at the Madison Square Garden event, appeared with Elon Musk. And ever since then, he's become known as a bit of a bomb thrower on television. You remember that last week he also was on TV and suggested that people buy Tesla stock, which was also sort of surprising.
Yeah, I'd say so. But just the beginning, potentially. Alex, thank you very much. Congrats on the book. It's good to see you.